Have you ever considered the fact that of the various revolutions that have taken place in the world, the United States Revolution, the American Revolution, is almost unique in having given birth to a free society? The Russian Revolution did not give birth to a free society. The French Revolution did not give birth to a free society. The Chinese Revolution did not, and you can go down. It's very hard to find any revolutions that did. Our own revolution almost went the way of all other revolutions. At the end of the Revolutionary War, when there was great dissatisfaction among the armed forces, and particularly the officer corps, because they hadn't been paid, a group formed a conspiracy. Among that group, I may say, was Alexander Hamilton, who was a very leading member of it. I have a great admiration for Alexander Hamilton as an intellect, and as having done a great deal to get the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. But I don't have much respect for his report on manufactures, which was an attempt to show that Adam Smith was wrong. At any rate, to go back to that story, because I think it's a fascinating story. This group of dissatisfied military officers wanted to set up a military junta to take over the country and run it so they could get their pay. And they wanted to have George Washington lead their junta. And it was only because of the personal character of George Washington, his resistance to the idea that he should become essentially a military dictator, but equally important, to the love which his troops bore for him, and for his calling together a mass meeting and getting up and making a speech in which he urged them not to go that route. I may say there were other generals around who were only too willing to assume that task in the United States, and it was only because of those personal characteristics of George Washington that the United States did not go the way of the other revolutions and become a military junta. If you're interested in that story, it's a fascinating story. It's told extraordinarily well in James Flexner's biography of George Washington, which is a marvelous 4-volume book that reads like a novel. But there was a second, later accident that I think was equally important. In the 1820s, 30s, there was no ideological resistance in the United States to state socialism. On the contrary, one state after another was setting up a state bank. The state of Indiana had the Bank of Indiana. The state of Illinois had a state bank of Illinois. The various states were building canals, which were state-owned. They were setting up businesses, which were state-owned. There was a great emergence of essentially state socialism. Now, that wasn't eliminated or reversed by anybody writing a good book showing that it was all nonsense and that it didn't conform to Adam Smith. What ended it was that you had a financial panic in 1837 as a result of things I won't go into, need to say monetary influences. But you had a panic in which all of these state enterprises went broke. And that gave state socialism a bad name. And I have no doubt whatsoever that on any objective reading of history, that episode deserves a great deal of credit for the fact that for the rest of the 19th century, it was taken for granted that government had no business getting involved in producing goods and services, setting up banks and things like that. Obviously, there were still movements and attempts to do it. There were still activities of that kind, but it was largely a free society. So our own freedom was largely a result of accident rather than of any inevitable forces.